Thanks for the invitation to speak today. So, let's start with the crisis. On a Wednesday in June 2024, RTE, which is our national broadcaster, aired a documentary, RTE Investigates Horses Making a Killing. And what people saw them shook them to their core. They saw gaps in the traceability system. They saw horses fraudulently re-identified. They saw animals manipulated into the food chain. But most disturbingly, they saw horrific footage of horses destined for slaughter being beaten and abused on the premises adjacent to that slaughter plant. The public reaction was immediate. There were protests held, parliamentary questions, countless headlines, social media outrage, and I suppose there was huge, intense scrutiny and criticism of the Department of Agriculture. But this is where I think the really important story begins. It's the story of what comes next. The media spotlight was an important catalyst in igniting progress, because sometimes progress is born from criticism, and its spotlights can help illuminate a path forward. So, as the Minister mentioned, there was a report, but before I get to that, Ireland is a nation of horse people, from breeding to racing to sport and leisure horses. The equine industry is woven into our cultural and economic fabric. It's an important employer, supporting tens of thousands of direct and indirect jobs in breeding, racing and training. The thoroughbred breeding and racing sector alone is worth an estimated $2.5 billion to the Irish economy annually. But people's trust was shaken, and we can't take public acceptance for granted in a changing world. So we had to reassure the public, and we needed to respond decisively, not only to improve welfare and to restore that trust and protect the industry, but also to protect individual horses, most importantly. So in considering how to move forward, we have to consider the industry itself. As the Minister touched on, it's a dynamic, international and fast-moving sector. But this dynamism also contributed to its vulnerability. So the documentary, I've gone too far. The documentary revealed something really painful to us, that our systems, which were built over decades, were no longer robust enough or fit for purpose. So within 3 weeks, we had to act decisively. We appointed Patrick Wall, as was mentioned earlier, who's an independent external expert. So Paddy is a vet, he's a medical doctor, he's former head of the Food Safety Authority of Ireland. He conducted a comprehensive review and produced a report. But what I think really helped to make our response successful was we did not minimise the problem. We did not defend the system, and we didn't wait for the storm to pass. We acted decisively and converted this energy and crisis into a catalyst for change. So that report was published in January 2025 and presented to our Minister Hayden. So last March, Minister Hayden then published his action plan based on the recommendations from that report. And really importantly, that action plan did not have vague commitments. It did not use aspirational language. There were 38 concrete, tangible recommendations and actions built around five simple headings. So outlined there in the slide, there's better accountability through better traceability. Part of that is to ensure that there's a responsible, accountable person for every horse. And in that way, that person is responsible for their welfare and their care. Stronger enforcement, which is a really important thing, built on proactive inspections. Thirdly, and a really important point, was improved protection at end of life is a key priority for us to ensure that horses are humanely treated. Optimising the use of science and technology to improve traceability, which the Minister touched on earlier. And then, really importantly, communication. Consulting experts, keeping those two-way communication channels open with industry, and educating the public. So what we learned was reform does not happen, and we're all aware of this, does not happen because you write a report. Reform only happens when you work together with industry to change behaviour. So, what do we do to change that behaviour, to try and drive that change? As is mentioned, horses move internationally, probably more so than other livestock. Last year alone, 20,000 horses left Ireland, half of those coming here to GB. So those movements, they create opportunities, such as was mentioned earlier, but also a risk. So we strengthened our export controls. From September 2024, horses could not be exported without being properly registered on our central equine database. In addition, the food chain information on their passport had to match the food chain information on our central database, regardless of what they were being exported for. So what was the result of this? In non-breeding thoroughbreds, ownership registration doubled compared to 2023, the previous year. So this was because we had embedded a compliance requirement into a critical control point. If you wanted to move your horse, you had to comply. So the learning from this was, if you want a behaviour to change, you have to build it into life events. So building on this experience, we I suppose, looked at horses and owners and the life events. So every horse has to register as a foal, changing ownership, maybe change of name. So at each of these life events, we now require confirmation of a horse's location. So we turned these life events into traceability checkpoints, if you want. Another example is our National Equine Census, which initially we asked people to engage on a voluntary basis, that it showed that they cared about welfare and that welfare was important to them. Unfortunately, I suppose initially the return rate was about 52%, which was disappointing. However, the following year, we linked completion of the census to being able to carry out registration of a foal. So if you didn't return a census, your equine premises number was deactivated, and as a result, then you wouldn't be able to register a foal or export a horse. So was it inconvenient? Yes, it was a little, but I suppose more importantly, was it effective? And it absolutely was. So I suppose we learned you do need a carrot, but unfortunately you also do need a stick. Consultation and collaboration and communication, I suppose, in changing behaviour, we also needed to listen to industry. It's so important that we worked with industry. So last July, we consulted publicly, and what we learned was really, I suppose, revealing and important. So there's no doubt the commitment of the industry is really strong. However, their knowledge of their responsibilities was quite varied. So I suppose you could see this as a failure, but we didn't. It's an opportunity, because if people care, education empowers them. So we simplified systems, we clarified roles, and we strengthened communication. And something else, I suppose, became really clear and very important was the power of champions for change. We in government departments can send out a message, and they're excellent messages, all of them. But unfortunately, not everybody listens to us, but when that message is echoed by industry leaders and industry voices, people really, really listen. So when racing yards, breeders, sport horse leaders reinforce reform, it becomes shared ownership of that reform and not just regulation. Huge credit to our industry, which they have engaged so constructively on this, and it's been really great, and it definitely has accelerated progress. That's not working. Okay. So another really important factor is enforcement. Most people take very good care of their horses, and they're very responsible. And they want to see those that are not complying, I suppose, punished or pulled up on it type thing. So in 2025, we rolled out proactive risk-based inspections. And this visible enforcement helped to show that there were consequences for non-compliance, and it demonstrated fairness, and that fairness in turn builds trust. So perhaps the most important reform has been, to ensure accountability, has been the launch of our central equine database. So since 2024, we used the census data in 2024 to link horses to a profile. So if you look at this, is anonymized data, but it basically shows that every active premises has horses associated with it. And it's the first time that we've had this for horses, where horses have been linked to that. And then what we've also done is that life events such as registration, change of ownership, they're, I suppose, those traceability checkpoints. But it also, so owners can move horses in, they can move horses out. The requirement when they're moving out is they have to move to a valid equine premises number, but this ensures that horses are linked to an individual person who is responsible for ensuring their welfare. So everything I've said, there's been great progress. It's been a collective leadership effort by industry. I suppose great credit to my own team from the commitment and dedication that they've shown, but also with the support and leadership that our Minister, Minister Hayden, has provided. So Minister Hayden's commitment to the project and the wider horse sector has made a real tangible difference. People don't feel dictated to, they feel represented. They feel they have an ally and someone who's working with them, not imposing these actions on them. That has accelerated the trust. So we could not have come this far, this quickly, without industry partners and clear ministerial leadership. So, at the heart of all of this is something very simple. We all want the same thing: healthy, happy horses, a strong sport, and a future we can all be proud of. So how do we get to that future? What's planned? We plan to incorporate sales houses and training yards as traceability checkpoints, bringing transporters into the system, integrating into traces, so the data on our central database, once a horse leaves Ireland, it comes off our database so that we only have the horses that are actually in Ireland on the database, increasing the accuracy. A move toward mandatory DNA profiling. Currently, it's about 80% of foals registered are DNA, have their DNA done as well. But in a global world of movement, identity must be verifiable. And ultimately, DNA may become one of the strongest guardians of the integrity of that system. Another thing we feel is really important is we want to tackle late registration. In 2024, 25% of those registered were over 12 months of age, which automatically means they are marked out of the food chain. Experience has told us and shown us that this can leave horses vulnerable to neglect at the end of life. So we hope to ensure that as many horses as possible retain their eligibility for the food chain. The lessons learned. I'll leave you with 3 lessons, maybe not just about horses, but crisis in general. As they say, never waste a crisis. The momentum is short-lived. The public attention fades and outrage cools. If we don't act when we have that energy, you could lose the opportunity to make real progress. Some of the reforms we implemented were on long-term wish lists for years, and the crisis accelerated that timeline. It's really important to link behaviour to pressure points to drive change. We saw that compliance increased most when registration, export, and movement depended on it. Critical control points drive engagement. So in any sector, trying to implement reform, ask where those equivalent life events are and where are the leverage moments. And thirdly, I cannot stress enough the importance of building relationships and strong communications. This, as I said, was a collective leadership and collaboration. It did not happen in a vacuum. It happened because of industry positivity and engagement. Without that buy-in from equine owners and stakeholders, we would not be where we are now. Consultation, it strengthened our reforms, but strong communication, that two-way communication, sustains them. But if we step back for just a minute from it, I suppose this is not just a story about horses, it's not just a story about Ireland. It's about what happens when a trusted system is exposed under a harsh light. So we could have responded defensively, we absolutely could, or you can respond constructively. So any crisis, it tests leadership and resilience, but it also reveals an opportunity. And I'm very proud of my team and our industry for their leadership and collaboration and how they've improved the system. In 2024, our equine sector was under intense scrutiny. 2026, we're building one of the most integrated traceability systems ever. That spotlight, which felt punitive, has been very productive. So the most important lesson of all is progress rarely begins in comfort, but it's important that we take the discomfort to turn it into meaningful change. So there's Mountie, my 13-2 pony. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you very much for listening.